Howdy ho, Maplers. You voted, I delivered. 250 Hoyoung. Hoyoung was complicated, to say the least, but I'll get into that more at the end. For now, the gear, it's the same drop gear that I've been using. Always pretty much using. A pretty okay cup. Our belt, a 17% attack weapon. Hoyoung is pretty strong. Really the only thing that's kinda difficult to start one-shotting with is the butterflies. And they're pretty rough. Even at 250 my butterflies aren't one-shotting in CLP, I don't think. So it's not terrible. Even without one-shotting butterflies, Hoyoung isn't super weak. This secondary was my buddy Jerry's. He loaned it to me because my butterflies weren't one-shotting in Lachlan with my secondary, and his pushed me over, which made it a little bit nicer to train through there. So thank you, Jerry, for that. Our drop earrings, and then a 9% attack emblem. Nothing too special. For the inner ability, I just stuck with drop rate. Hoyoung doesn't need attack speed or anything super special, so drop rate or meso rate, whichever one I rolled, I would have kept. For the V Matrix, as always, decent holy symbol, that first slot. It's where it belongs. It's so good. It's so good. For the first boost node, I used the 4 decks, Talisman Clone, and the butterflies, primarily because the clones and the butterflies are a massive part of your mobbing up until Arcana. I mean, even in Arcana they're still pretty useful, but early on it's very beneficial to have them one-shotting. You could honestly replace Vortex with As You Will Fan, because that's a pretty much spammed skill for early training areas, but I just put both those in ASAP to get the max damage I could out of the clones and butterflies. First skill, Hoyoung's Wrath of the Gods. Oh my lord. There's a problem with Hoyoung's V skills in that if you want to see anything while playing Hoyoung, you have to turn the transparency up to max. It's a big problem for Hoyoung, and you'll see it in my dojo video that I'll put out later. You just make half the map disappear behind all the stuff you're putting on screen. And this skill definitely obscures vision pretty heavily. But the damage on it is nuts. It's an iframe. It's really, really good. And it's an insane burst skill. It also has like niche uses for mobbing, which is super duper handy as well. Then Sage Clone Rampage is their next V skill. Absolutely nuts. Like, this skill's burst damage is borderline overpowered. Like, this skill's almost as good as Infinity Blades for Adele. It's that goddarn strong. It's really, really good. And it's actually really good at mobbing too, because it gives you even more clones to mob with. It's very, very well rounded as a skill. Then, the Tiger. The biggest summon you got, the one that's going to take up half your darn screen for 45 seconds. It makes mobs and bosses just vanish behind its largeness. It's ridiculous. But it's a very good summon for mobbing. It does very good consistent damage for bossing. It's a very good skill. Hoyoung really doesn't have bad skills. It just has a lot of skills. For your next boost node, Ground Shaking Wave, Humanity As You Will Fan, and Iron Fan Gale. The As You Will Fan and Ground Shattering Wave are pretty much your bossing combo. You want to have those two skills macroed together so that you can use them. Although, I believe with GMS's attack speed cap, you can't use the macro, so most Hoyoungs just spam Ground Shattering Wave because it's the higher DPS, because 0 attack speed, like with Pathfinder before they fixed the macro, it just doesn't flow well if you have 0 attack speed. But for me, since I never use green pots because I can't get enough gold pots as it is, I'm not going to use any coins on green pots. The macro works really, really well and it feels pretty good. And then the last boost node, honestly, I don't like this trio at all. Like, it's useful, you definitely want it, because the skills are handy and you're gonna be using them, but outside of Seeking Ghost Flame, I'd never used Gourd. I still don't use Gourd, even when I'm bossing. Like, Hoyoung has so many skills, I just don't have the keys to make Gourd an easily reachable skill. Like, if you look down there, it's on my 6th key. It's so far away from everything else. So I just generally just respawn the Ghost Flame to use up that energy. The Degenerate, or the Degeneration is pretty much just bossing, and then Talisman is mobbing and bossing together. It's kind of got a mind of its own, and it goes off and does its own thing. It's a really handy summon, but it's like not vital to the class, so I would say prioritize this last among your other skills. Then the Will skill for completing the storyline, character building for that bonus EXP. It's always handy if you have the extra node shards. And then I don't have them listed, but decent sharp eyes and decent speed infusion, pretty handy. I have decent sharp eyes on my gloves for thief classes, so I don't need to use this even though I made it level 10. I forgot. So I wasted a few nodes. But nothing too bad. And since it's a thief class, you always want Last Resort. It's just a nuts burst skill. Like, Hoyoung has very, very surprisingly high burst. Like, I don't know, this class is pretty strong. It's not like Adele levels of just blatantly overpowered, but it definitely has moments where it shines really bright in terms of both bossing and mobbing. For your training, 200 to 210. If it ain't broke, don't fix it right. Below the Cave and Eastern Cave Path too. Surprisingly enough, for this character, even though I hyped it up so much, I actually skipped Reverse City on this character because I knew a little bit about my early game leveling path because a few of my friends have trained Hoyoung, and they said Choo Choo in Slurpy Forest was really, really easy and overpowered, so I decided, sure, we'll just go with the old training method. But Hoyoung, oh, the training. I didn't feel like I had a grasp on this class until the mid 230s. It's overly complicated. But for the rotation, generally, you'll cycle Lucid Soul or your Tiger Summon on this far side because you're not really going to hit that. And then ideally, I wouldn't be using the key macro for As You Will Fan and Earth Shattering because Earth Shattering kind of locks you in place on the ground and it makes mobbing less fluid, but all you do is just jump through and use As You Will Fan, and then your butterflies and your clones will clear anything that you're not directly hitting. And then this bad boy over here will stay here and kill this entire side for 45 seconds. It honestly made the EXP really, really good. I got to 210 in under 2 hours. It's pretty darn good for what it is. But, as I said, I skipped over Reverse City and went straight to Choo Choo Island. In Choo Choo Island, there's really no bad maps. You can do Biddy Bopple, you can do Slurpy Forest Steps, you can do the river maps. Hoyoung's pretty darn good at mobbing. It's very, very focused mobbing. There's so much to keep track of while you're mobbing on this class. However, the rotation is pretty darn simple. Lucid Soul, Tiger, or, since Tiger's on cooldown, your Vortex just goes up there on the top, and that'll take care of that. And then you just spam the combo of your Stone and the Iron Fan Gale. And between your butterflies, between that summon up top, between your clones tagging monsters, you're full map clearing with literally just this. And all I'm doing is clicking 2 keys down here. This combo of Iron Fan Gale and 1000 Ton Stone is pretty much your best mobbing combination for just general skills. Like, As You Will Fan has a very low amount of mobs hit, and it has a pretty wonky hitbox as well. Iron Gale Fan has a very long horizontal hitbox, and the 1000 Ton Stone has a very good, like, box squared hitbox around you. So they work together in combination to be pretty much your best mobbing skill. It's not as good as it was before they fixed the animation canceling with 10,000 Ton Stone, but it's still pretty much the best thing you've got. And then into Lachlan. It's not Reverse City this time. Shocker, I know. Reverse City is still good, don't get me wrong. Hoyoung is actually really good at mobbing. It's not like Xenon or Luminous tiers of flexible mobbing, but you have enough flexibility to make almost any good map work with Hoyoung. Like, large maps you get into kind of an issue, but if you're not training with Frenzied Spawn, if you have like Kishin or no Kishin, large maps are still pretty good for Hoyoung. But with Frenzied Spawn, you kind of want to be in those mid to small maps. But almost all of those mid to small maps, you have the flexibility to make them all work, because Hoyoung's got good amount of summons, it has very good map coverage. For this, Lucid Soul, Tiger on the house. It's pretty much where these things go at this point. Let's just rebuff. Tiger isn't off cooldown yet. Very close actually, so there he is. So you just drop the Tiger there. Up top is where you drop your Vortex, and then you're here down on the bottom. I usually stand around this rope here, and then just spam your combo again. And by golly, you're full map clearing. Now, you don't have 100% uptime on both your Vortex and your Tiger, so what I did was, when Tiger despawned, I'd set Lucid Soul over there, and while I'm waiting to charge up energy for another Vortex, I would cycle in your Clone Rampage and your Wrath of Gods. The Wrath of Gods will hit the top platform very, very often, because the hitbox is above your character for that. It will always spawn above you, it won't ever spawn below you. So just keep that in mind if you're ever putting that into your training rotation, it's always going to attack from above, never below. And the clones pretty much, I don't really know how the clones work. It's like they have a mind of their own sometimes. Like, there will be times where I didn't hit a mob at all with any of my mobbing skills, and a clone will still show up and attack something. So they're kind of wonky, but primarily whenever a butterfly hits, whenever another clone hits, whenever you hit something, you have that chance to summon a clone. And the range on the clones it's ginormous. Like, they'll just show up anywhere pretty much. It's like, if there's a mob, they'll show up and hit it. No problems using that as a mobbing skill. It's pretty darn good. And then for 225 until 250, pretty much I stayed here because, one, it's very, very easy, and two, my butterflies stopped one-shotting here. So they would definitely not be one-shotting in Esfera, which means I can't rely on them to be a benefit to my mobbing as much there. And the EXP rates that I was getting from my tests were low enough that just staying in Arcana was the faster alternative. Even though, as it is right now, CLP is full like 24/7. It's really, really bad. But my buddy David said he'd let me borrow his map just to show off the rotation, because CLP is pretty much full 24/7. Even this early into the morning, I had to just look beforehand to see if there was an open channel, and unlucky enough there wasn't. But David said I could use his channel. Thank you for that. The rotation is pretty simple. You put your Vortex on top, and then you just use 1,000 Ton Stone and Iron Gale Fan down here at the bottom. It's really, really good. And then you cycle in your Tiger once that is down, and you put Tiger on the middle platform because he'll cover more. And you'll get very, very, very good EXP rates. And there will be times where you don't have the scroll energy or the cooldowns available towards you to use either of those, so you can just cycle in your gods or your extra clones. The mobbing is really, really good. Like, it's a little bit off kilter because of the EXP buffs from the event, but towards the end of 250s, I'm usually at like my peak efficiency for training, and Hoyoung with the event buffs was averaging 125 bill per hour in this map. So yeah, your other rotation is just to put the Tiger here, but there is another rotation for this that is one that I used quite often because it's just very, very simple, which was to put your summons on the bottom. Now, this is a little bit less EXP. What I did for my testing, it was about 3 to 5 mil less EXP. But the idea behind this one is, your Iron Fan Gale throws out a clone. That clone will go all the way to the bottom platform and hit mobs down there. So you're not actually losing efficiency from it missing mobs, and then you can just stay up here in the middle and just attack left and right. And this one is slightly easier to do because you don't have to worry about as many cooldowns. You're not cycling in your clones, you're not cycling in your god into the rotation. You're just using Tiger and Vortex, and you're using the most wonderful skill in the universe, your Miracle Tonic, to refill your energy between those two. It's pretty perfect. You don't have to pay attention to it too much. So that's all there really is to it. Thank David again for letting me use his map to demonstrate, but Hoyoung surprisingly has very, very good mobbing. And that's where I got to 250. Before I go into the bossing, I do have, like, things I want to talk about for Hoyoung. If Miracle Tonic did not exist, I would hate this class. Like, not even kidding. This is the saving grace of this class, and it is all because of this darned energy system. I don't know why. Butterfly Dream and Clone. These are your base buffs. These are so vital to the class. Why are they tied to your energy system? You're pretty much forced to use this to buff up. That feels terrible, because this skill is absolutely vital for setting up your mobbing. It's vital for setting up bossing burst. It's so important to have this off cooldown that needing it to just buff up to start things is really stupid. I really don't like it. As well, I really didn't feel like I had a good grasp for this class until like 235, because there is so much to keep track of. You have 3 different energy types. You have to use all 3 of them to generate energy faster in your middle orb, and then you have to use skills that use your talisman energy to generate scroll energy. That's a lot to keep track of when you're learning a class. Like, it is very, very beginner unfriendly how much you have to just get good and figure out on your own. Like, a lot of these skills too aren't very beneficial for mobbing. Most of them mob well, but they aren't terribly useful. There is a very good skill that I never used. It's the Talisman Warp Gate. This skill is incredible, but at the same time, it uses talisman energy. I'm already struggling to keep all my energies in wrap and to just like use all the keys I have on my keyboard. Like, this is pretty nuts. I had the gate on my tilde key for a while, but after I got into CLP, I just stopped bothering with it. I tried to get it to work in Esfera, and using it got me the best EXP rates in Esfera, but it still wasn't worth the amount of effort and focus it required to get those rotations to work. There is so much to keep track of with Hoyoung. It's like, it's not relaxing to mob with. Like, you have to be attentive at all times. That last rotation where I was just cycling Vortex and Tiger was the only rotation I found in CLP that let me, like, at least look at my second monitor and try to watch something over there. And, like, it's not a fault of the class. It's a complicated class by nature. There's a lot going on and there's a lot you have to focus on. But it's overly complicated. Like, again, I go back to these 2 skills. Why do they require talisman and scroll energy? It's really dumb. These are your basic job buffs. Like, imagine if Nightlord had to jump through hoops to use Shadow Partner. That's effectively what Talisman Clone has become. It's really, really dumb. Imagine if you had to jump through even more hoops to get your marks. That's how vital these skills are to your base class, that I don't know why they're tied to such an important system that is literally required for half of your other skills. It feels really, really bad. But once you figure it out, it's not terrible, it just becomes tedious. And tedious isn't good. Tedious is tedious, it's annoying to do. But that's me complaining about minor things. For Hoyoung's bossing, again, Hoyoung has very, very good burst. Like, surprisingly good burst, but not dramatically overpowered burst. It also has very good consistent damage between your butterflies, between all your clones, between your macroed As You Will fan and the Earth Shattering. It's really good consistent damage. It doesn't really struggle at anything. It also has one of the best iframes, I think, in the game, because you can determine how long it lasts just by keeping the key held down, and by how long you use the iframe, it determines how long the cooldown is. It's really nice to use. It's also got its own bind. Very nice. The bind feels wonky because it's like your giant shuriken on Nightlord. It has a set distance that Hoyoung throws the clone out, so you kind of got to position yourself, but it's a very, very forgiving hitbox. Like, there are times where I was pretty darn sure I missed an elite boss, and it's just like, nah, you bound it, champ, go get him. So it's pretty nice in that respect. And really for Hoyoung, it just comes back to me that this class is just overly complicated. It's a great class. It is a beautiful, gorgeous class. The animations on this are just top-notch everywhere. The buffs look amazing. Using these buffs, just like seeing the animations, especially Butterfly Dream, this is one of my favorite buff animations in the game. It just looks so god darn good. But looks don't make a class. Unfortunately. Or else Shade and Hoyoung would be rank 1 and 2. Sadly, they're not. The class is good. It is. I enjoyed training it after I figured out what I was doing. But like the 230 some levels before I figured out what I was doing were pretty atrocious. I didn't have fun. Like, Lachlan felt fine because it was an easy rotation to remember. And I didn't have to worry too much about any energy struggles. I just had to look and see, oh hey, what cooldowns are up between these three? And then what cooldown is up down here. So it wasn't much to keep track of, and I just used whatever was available. But like when I was testing maps, this was an awful class to test maps on because there's so much to keep track of. Especially when you're still learning halfway through at 250. Oh hey, what's the best rotation to refill my energy when my miracle tonic is on cooldown? It wasn't very fun to test maps, but thankfully, the maps that I tested the most were still pretty good. Like, a lot of the alternative maps were pretty much just like blatantly worse. Rev 3 was very close to the Dancing Shoes, but at the same time, again, Rev 3 is a popular map, and I can avoid buying Firestarter service in Red Dancing Shoes, so I went there. It was only like, I think it was only 1.2 mil EXP per second less on average, so it wasn't that dramatic of a difference, and as well, Lachlan levels just go by super duper fast. And for the bossing, it's overly complicated in the bossing. I'm not kidding, there were times in my early dojo runs where I'd be halfway into a boss in the 40, like the mid 40 floors, and I would just lock up. I'd be like, oh fuck, what's next? What skill do I use next? Where am I on my rotation? What am I trying to accomplish using my skills? What energy am I trying to get? What skills am I going to use to get that energy? Why am I getting that energy? And there'd be times where I'd do rotations to build up scroll and talisman energy, and then realize after doing that, I didn't need talisman energy, because the skill I wanted to use was on cooldown. So it's like I was being inefficient because I was trying to be efficient, but I wasn't. It's just like, it's another get good wall of this class that you just need to know by instinct pretty much what skills you're going for and what energy you need to use to generate. It's really complicated. Like, there's so much that you're paying attention to just on what you're doing that you lose sight of what the boss is doing and what the fight is doing. There's so much so that I would often drop my vortex or my tiger after a boss had teleported out of my range because I was just trying to make sure I did everything in the right order. And that's not a bad thing. Having complicated classes in this game is good. Blaster is very, very complicated in the combos and the weaving that you can do, and it's a very, very good class. It's very, very niche because it's a very complicated class, but it's still good to have complicated classes. For every Nightlord, and Hero and Adele where you only push like 3 buttons, it's good to have a class like Hoyoung and Blaster where you're spamming through freaking 12 buttons. But for like the average Maple, this is sensory overload to the max. Just all of your skills obscure the bosses. 100% if you're bossing with this class, turn your transparency all the way down so you can actually see the boss through what you're doing, because as beautiful as these skills are, they're visually obstructive to the max, like to the absolute extremes. I thought Dual Blade's Tornado was bad by how much it obscured the screen. Hoyoung takes the freaking cake. It will almost take the entire dojo arena worth of space and just cover it in stuff when you're bursting. It's so absurd. It's so cool looking too. It's like a double-edged sword. I want to burst it, but I can't see what I'm hitting. But yeah, for Hoyoung, he is far, 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 far from a bad class. It's very, very good. Its mobbing is great once you get a grasp on it. Its bossing is probably pretty dang strong just from my dojo runs alone. The burst on this class is legitimately good. I don't think there's really a downside to Hoyoung outside of it just being so user unfriendly when you're trying to learn the class. And if you can push through that and get a feel for what you're doing on this class, I think it'll be very, very rewarding for you. I don't know how I would recommend this to new players because, again, if you put the time in and if you get the class down, this is a very, very, very good class. But it takes a long time to get to that point. Like as I was saying, I was in the mid 230s before I really felt like I knew what I was doing at all times while mobbing on this character. I didn't feel like I was fumbling blind into the darkness, just pressing keys and hoping it worked. But this class oozes potential. It definitely does, just like Blaster. If you put the time in, you'll get good results out. So definitely, if this class looks interesting to you, 100% try it. It's very strong early on. You don't need tons of funding. It's got very good bursts, so you're not going to struggle with early bossing. It's a very good choice for new players, but at the same time, I would probably recommend something easier first. Like, I would definitely recommend Hoyoung over Phantom, because Phantom has its own set of problems for new players. But I wouldn't recommend it over a Dual Blade or a Night Lord initially. Like, if the person had like a good understanding in the game, maybe they had a few Link characters in Legion under their belt, then I would say, hey, yeah, go ahead, do Hoyoung. It's gonna be tough, but you get out what you put in for this class. That's 100%. That's pretty much what I have to say about Hoyoung. Needlessly complicated, but goddamn drop dead gorgeous. I hope you guys liked this video. A lot of you voted for Hoyoung. I was surprised on just how many votes there were in general, but it was pretty clear in a way that you guys wanted to see Hoyoung. And that's great. I was looking forward to doing Hoyoung as well. He was the newest class before Adele. I was initially going to do Hoyoung before Adele, but then 250s started stacking up and then Adele got released. I'm like, well, that plan's kind of shot. So I'm glad you guys voted for Hoyoung. I had fun with it. It was a lot of trips and falls, but we got there in the end. For the next 250, I think I've done too many easy classes in a row. The next one, it's gonna be a painful one. It's time to do Bishop. I'm gonna hate myself in like a week, I just know it, but as it is, I just did probably 2 of the easier farmers in a row. They both had just zoom in levels, so, and especially now with the events going on, the XP buffs are absolutely absurd. I pretty much should do a hard class, so Bishop seems like the choice. 250s are also in an awkward spot for me right now because all of the new V skills that got shown off in KMS, a lot of classes got skills that might like change their mobbing rotations significantly, so a good chunk of the classes I have left or on back burner. Just they have to wait until their new skill, because I don't want to put out a video with training rotations for people that'll be outdated in like weeks or months. That'd be kind of dumb. And there are still quite a few classes that aren't going to be dramatically changed. For the 250s I have done already, I'm lucky enough, almost all of the 250s I've done, their new V skills don't dramatically change their training rotations. It's actually really nice. Beast Tamer, we don't know what their 250 is. Same with Kana, so no matter what I did, damned if I do, damned if I don't. It might change their training rotation, it might not. We'll find out. But Demon Avenger, their new skill is pretty much just bossing. Mobbing rotations, still generally the same. Nightwalker, only bossing for your new skill. Training rotations, still the same, even though I didn't do a video for that. But Phantom, it's a lot of mobility, but it seems like more of a bossing repositioning skill than it does a mobbing skill, so I don't think it's going to change too dramatically. Luminous is pretty much only a bossing skill, nothing changes there. Zero is just bonus damage, and I mean, let's be real, Zero in reg servers is just tornado spam with electricity, because Frenzied Spawn just breaks this class entirely. Nightlord's new skill is just burst damage and additional damage off burst. Nothing really crazy for the mobbing. It might change a little bit because additional damage is always good for mobbing. Shadower is just more bossing. Xenon, it looks like more bossing. It might have some effect to the mobbing, but Xenon's already just a crazy mobber. I don't think any one skill is going to dramatically change how good this class is. Dual Blade slightly changes with its new V skill. It's slightly better at mobbing, but at the same time, it just don't train as a Dual Blade, please. Marksman, it's pretty much only bossing burst. It's a lot of bossing burst, but it doesn't really change your mobbing. Mihail, it would have been nice to have client-sided Royal Guard when I did my Mihail, but at the same time, it wouldn't have changed too much dramatically, so that's fine. Battle Mage, this is the only one really that changes the mobbing, because the vastly enhanced teleport range and damage would help out for mobbing rotations, but at the same time, it's probably not going to change them too dramatically, so I'm not too worried. Wild Hunter is just a bossing skill. Pathfinder has a little bit of mobbing in its new V skill, but it's not enough that it's going to dramatically change the training meta for Pathfinder, because looking left and right and clearing an entire map is just OP as it is. Hoyoung's next skill is a very underrated burst skill. It's something to look forward to if you want to main Hoyoung. God dang, it looks good. And then Adele is just another bossing burst skill. Nothing really changes there. So we're pretty lucky in that respect that not too many of the 250s I've done will be changed by their new skills, but a lot of the 250s I have left will be significantly changed. So my pool of available characters to 250 before the next V skills come out is kind of small, which is why we're doing Bishop. I don't foresee Bishop's new skill revolutionizing Bishop's training, because Bishop doesn't train. You job change to Ice Lightning because you love yourself. Bishop was not made to mob. It really wasn't. Oh boy. But I want to do this 10k, or I want to do all these 250s rather legitimate. I want to train every class as that class, and I want to get them there on their own skills and talents. See just how bad the worst are and see just how darn overpowered the best are. But that's been Hoyoung. I hope you guys liked this video. If you have any questions about 10k Legion, about Hoyoung, about my grind, or about MapleStory in general, ask down below. I make it a point in all of these videos to answer any and all questions you guys have, because I like interacting with you. I love talking about MapleStory. Who'da thunk it? But, man, I hope I see you alive in that next one. Bishop's gonna be an interesting one. See you guys later.